Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to one of the lectures that I get to give you. I know that you all look forward to those. Today we are going to continue on the look you started with the Tudors with Henry VIII, and we're going to be looking at his daughters. And the story of his daughters is an interesting one because um, they're very much so intertwined with the events of his divorces and the changes which occurred to England. And his job as a parent, which, by the way, he wasn't a very good one, is definitely going to reflect on the two of them. The first one of the daughters that we're going to look at was Queen Mary the First, and she's come down through history with the very unpleasant name of Bloody Mary because of the religious persecutions during her reign. So, Mary Tudor was the daughter of King Henry VIII and his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. Now, Mary was the fifth child of Catherine of Aragon and Henry VIII. She was the only one who was able to survive past infancy. And, she will grow up very much so playing the role of a princess in England. At the age of 6, she's going to be betrothed to King Charles V, the King of Spain, who was also at that time the Holy Roman Emperor. And Charles will break off that engagement after 3 years. But Charles and Mary would actually continue to be really good friends. So things weren't going well, as we know, for Henry and for Catherine. He desperately wanted that son and an heir. And it's at that point where he decides that he's going to go to Pope Clement VII to end his marriage. And you know the story from there that Clement will say no. Henry declares himself exempt from papal authority because he's the king, and he makes himself um, the head of the English church. And that's why in 1533, when Henry marries Anne Boleyn, things are really going to start to change for Queen Mary. Anne and Henry do have a daughter, and they will name her Elizabeth. She'll be the future Queen Elizabeth I, who we're going to talk about a little bit later. So Mary finds herself in this really precarious situation. She is going to be um, booted out of her own household. Royal children are given their own household, their own staffs to look after them. And she's going to have to live with the baby Elizabeth. So right away, there's a lot of animosity towards her new infant half sister. Um, Things will continue to kind of get bad for Mary. In 1536, Catherine of Aragon is going to die. Um, Anne Boleyn is going to be accused of treason, and Mary is going to be forced by King Henry to deny the Pope's authority and therefore her own legitimacy. So she has to publicly stand up and say that the marriage to Catherine of Aragon wasn't legitimate. It wasn't there in the eyes of the church. It wasn't a blessed union by God. So therefore, she is not the legitimate heir to the throne. So she's going to grow up, very rarely seeing her father. And, she's also going to witness her father get married 4 more times before he dies in 1547. Now, he does get his longtime male heir, the future King of England, um, King Edward VI, was born from Henry's third wife, Jane Seymour, and he was the official successor of the throne. After that, Henry had decided it would be Mary and then Elizabeth. Part of the deal that Mary had to make by renouncing the Pope and swearing that her father was the true authority in England was that she would be in that line of succession. Now, when Henry VIII died, Edward is still a minor, and he's going to remain that way for his entire 6-year reign as king. And so therefore others are ruling on his behalf. We call this being a region. And they're going to try to continue to grow this Protestant church. And they wanted to ensure that Mary wouldn't be part of this line. Mary, although she had renounced the fact that her father and mother had gotten married, and she acknowledged that Henry VIII was the rightful king of England and the head of the Church of England, she still continued to be a devout Catholic, and she did practice her faith. Um, she had her own chapel, much like Catherine of Aragon did in her home. Priests did still give her the sacraments. So, she was still seen as a danger by the Protestants. So they wanted to ensure that she wouldn't bring back the Catholic faith. So what they did is they named Henry VIII's niece, a woman by the name of Lady Jane Grey, in line for the throne. And when Edward dies in 1553, Lady Jane Grey would become the Queen of England for the next 9 days. This really ticked off the people of England. Okay, although they didn't have a deep love for Queen Mary, Mary was basically able to convince the Privy Council, that's kind of like the cabinet of the government, the most powerful group of people, along with the people's support, that Mary was the rightful heir. So poor Lady Jane Grey would actually find herself accused of treason, and she would be put to death in the Tower of London. And with Lady Jane Grey out of the way, Mary will become the Queen. So Mary's going to get to work right away trying to undo all of the things that her father did. The very first thing that she does is she reinstates her parents' marriage, which now makes her sister, Elizabeth, put into a very precarious situation. She's not legally recognized anymore as being, a direct heir to King Henry. The other thing that she did, as I mentioned, she's going to put to death all of those people who conspired to put Jane Grey on the throne and keep her away from it. Now, there was some hope when she first became the queen. Her initial ruling council is a mix of Protestants and Catholics. Okay, she doesn't want to have a huge transition right away and a shock to the system. But as her reign starts to progress, she is going to get more and more Catholic. She's going to really shift England away from that Protestant country created by Henry VIII and return it under the sphere of the Catholic Church. She's going to do this by forging closer ties with the Vatican and other European countries and leaders that have Catholic monarchies, and no more so than Spain. In 1554, she's going to announce her intentions to marry Prince Philip of Spain. He's the son of Charles V, King of Spain, and he's next in line to the throne. This is a really unpopular choice for the Protestants because they kind of see this as being the end to Henry's reforms. Spain was perhaps one of the most Catholic countries in Europe at the time. Some would even argue more so than Italy, although Italy doesn't exist till 1871, but the Italian kingdoms. So a lot of these Protestants in England look at this and say that, when Philip becomes the king of Spain, England is going to shift dramatically into, only being a Catholic country. And there was a lot of fear that Philip would also basically just take over England, making it part of his kingdom. They didn't think Mary would be strong enough to stop him. Mary is smitten. Philip, who is much younger than her, is one of Europe's most attractive bachelors, and she was deeply, deeply in love with him. Although, in reality, sadly, Philip isn't so much in love with her. The feelings are not mutual. So, Parliament is convinced to allow this marriage to go through, which makes sense because Mary is stacked, her council and parliament with people who are very much so loyal to her. Now, this is not going to be a great marriage. Okay, Mary is sadly going to suffer the same fate as her father, and it's going to be a very troubled union. Philip didn't stay in England. Philip came for the wedding and he went back to Spain, which makes sense. He's the heir to the Spanish throne. He should be playing an active role in ruling Spain. He would return periodically to England to try to impregnate his wife to ensure that an heir to the throne of England and Spain would be produced. And unfortunately, it never really happened. Twice she would be declared pregnant. She did what queens do at that time. She went into seclusion, but sadly, no child was born. Um, Philip, although he was handsome and loved by Mary, Philip found her to be very, very unattractive and didn't like the times that he was with her. There were rumors that Philip had a number of affairs, and there was even a rumor that just prior to Mary's death, Philip hit on Mary's sister Elizabeth, basically saying that once Mary passes away, this would be a union that would be fit for them both, which disgusted Elizabeth and would feed into the long-standing hatred she's going to have for Philip. So where does Bloody Mary come from? Well, Mary, as I said, started off kind of being open to the idea of allowing the Protestants to have a say, to all of a sudden switching it around to actively persecuting Protestants. In 1555, she's going to bring back England's heresy laws, which had existed prior to her father's Act of Succession. And she is going to begin burning offenders at the stake. And she starts with a man by the name of Thomas Cranmer. And he is the Archbishop of Canterbury. Cranmer was Henry VIII's longtime advisor, and he was the one who signed off on Catherine of Aragon and Henry's divorce. Once he is put to death, massive arrests begin. Almost 300 heretics are convicted. Most were just common citizens, and they would be burned. Countless others would die imprisoned by her. And, we see a mass exodus of Protestant leaders leaving England, going to Germany and Geneva, and their families would set up there. And this is going to actually set up, a resurgence of a new kind of Protestantism that would come to England called Puritanism. But we'll talk about that later. Now, not all of Mary's reign was about dating, Prince Philip and trying to kill the Protestants. Mary is going to do a couple things. She is going to expand international trade for England, and this is going to definitely help to reestablish some of the losses that occurred when her father broke away from the church. She's also going to try to reform currency. It won't really work out, but Elizabeth is going to continue that process, which will be successful, and this is going to be good for England's economy. She's going to get involved in a brief war with France because she wants to support Spain. And it's going to be a very big loss for them because they're going to lose a battle at a place called Calais. And this was the last place in France where England had land and had a foothold. It's in the French province of Brittany. So once that loss occurs at Calais, England is no longer on the continent anymore, and they are once again back to being an island. Sadly, Mary's health had always been bad, and ultimately in 1558, Mary will pass away. We think historians basically think that she passed away from cancer. And with her death, it ended a very bloody and brutal time in England, a time of upheaval. But it's going to basically lead into the reign of her sister Elizabeth, who's going to take England out of this bloody period of time and lead it into its golden age.